Guess who's finally back for a Monster Monday, which is still the best way to start your week. I've got a fancy new Patreon for you all to check out, as well as some stupendous stickers from Blue, and a brand new monster. At least to me. We're exploring Monster Hunter Explorer this time around with Goldar's Dragon Sona, the Nef Garmat. Jokes aside, the Nef Garmat is an Egyptian-themed elder dragon from that Monster Hunter Explorer that I just talked about. A phone game that, from my understanding, never really made it over here to the US. Nevertheless, somebody on the Discord managed to hear about it, suggested it, and was patient enough to wait for me to get around to putting it together. There's some Anubis design in the Nef Garmat's features, particularly in its head, and its powers do play into that at least a little bit. The Nef Garmat is able to drain the bioenergy of regions, which kills the local foliage and converts the lands into more of the deserts that it favors, and that it has control over. Its most obvious powers are its control over these deserts, ranging from the creation of pits of sinking sand to rising rubble from these sands and launching them in a tidal wave of stone. That's not the right word for it. A terror wave of stone? Anyway, I built the Nef Garmat as a true and proper dragon, though one with an admittedly more limited intelligence. It's going to be one of those primal dragons, but its association with the desert and its sands led to me also adding the Earth trait to it. As the Nef Garmat is an Elder Dragon, I'm using level 18 for its design, which is kind of just my go-to level for Elder Dragons, and will continue to be so until I have a reason to choose otherwise. Paizo tends to give their dragons a bit more gas for their level than other creatures, and I will admit that I followed suit with the Nef Garmat. We're talking about an Elder Dragon here, so we need Elder Dragon size stats. That means we're starting with extreme strength for this powerful plumed powerhouse, as it does honestly make a wide range of physical attacks. Further exemplifying its terrifying physicality is a constitution that just sits below high, making the Nef Garmat a hardy creature in the deserts it has drained of life. Now, despite its association with the earth and sand, the Nef Garmat is fully capable of flight, and a moderate dexterity should both aid with that and help it pull off some of the more acrobatic moves that it demonstrates. Its wisdom and charisma are similarly low, giving it matching mental fortitude and majesty, whereas its intelligence is a bit more bestial in value. Following this low wisdom, the Nef Garmat features a moderate perception that does carry the boon of dark vision and tremor sense alike. I honestly don't imagine that the Nef Garmat is too concerned about accuracy. It has a wide swath of far-hitting effects aplenty that it can pick through for prey at its pleasure. That leaves us with a low acrobatics when it comes to skills, which is honestly mostly to enable its ability to fly, and then is followed by a high athletics. We have an extreme strength, but the Nef Garmat doesn't have any particular abilities that call upon this, aside from one exception that we'll talk about when I get down to it. Obviously, before we can get to that though, we have to dive into the dunes and determine the defenses of this desert dragon. Simply enough, we'll start with a high armor class, keeping this as a daunting target to hit in the first place. Though admittedly I do tend to go for a high AC value in most cases. I have accompanied that with a pool of hit points sitting between moderate and high, though closer to the former rather than the latter. I had actually considered going with a high pool of hit points, but I ended up including a middling resistance to physical damage, demonstrating the classic Monster Hunter hide that will turn away blades of insufficient quality. It does still have a weakness to cold to exploit, but then has that classic dragon immunity to both paralysis and sleep. Now, you might notice that I didn't use any components this time around, and the reasoning behind that is a little bit twofold. Firstly, there was page space. That's it. Secondly, in its home game, the Nef Garmat's head and wings can be broken. But these body parts don't quite feature into any of the abilities that I designed for the Nef Garmat. So rather than trying to shoehorn something in, I took a page from the last Elder Dragon I made, and ended up foregoing the idea entirely. As for its saving throws, they are simple and straightforward. Just down the line, we have a high fortitude, a moderate reflex, and then a low will save. As is often the case when I don't have a special concept in mind, I just ended up following the monster's ability scores to determine these values. That does bring us to the Nef Garmat's offensive capabilities, and true to the powerhouse pattern that we've put forward, it's armed with 3 melee strikes, all of which use a high attack bonus. This meant, from a design standpoint, I had to differentiate them with damage and traits, which is actually the reason I ended up not including its wings, I think they would have ended up being a little bit too similar to its tail or claw strike, depending on which way I went with them. But as for those aforementioned claws, they have the agile trait and the lowest reach of these attacks, influencing the use of a moderate damage value. Still pretty meaty, and a great follow-up to a series of strikes. Its jaws though are a bit heavier. They really only have reach going for them, and they don't have any other special abilities or traits, which does lead to a high damage value for them. This shackled-headed dragon's bite is definitely worse than its bark. That leaves us with its tail, which has the greatest reach of these strikes, and the sweep trait. Between that reach and the sort of bargain bin agile it's got, I figured it's about on par with its claws, and thus assigned it a moderate damage value. There is another aspect to the tail that might make it a bit more alluring to use, but we'll get to that in just a bit. Now, one of the most notable aspects of the Nef Garmat is its command over its environment, the swirling sands that it surrounds itself with. To explore that concept, I started by designing Sand Trap. This 2-action ability creates a pit not unlike the trap of an antlion, that slowly pulls prey towards its center. This is a 20-foot burst, but that has to be within the reach of its tail, since that is what it uses to stir up these effects. As such, the Nef Garmat gains immunity to the extreme DC fortitude save that slowly drags prey caught towards the center, leaving them as victims for the Nef Garmat. This is a brutal case of zone control that is based on the aforementioned Antlion Trap spell, but tuned up just a bit. Critically failing against this effect leaves you immobilized. However, the DC to escape that immobilization is merely moderate, due to my own experiences with casters getting grabbed in campaigns that I've run. That can quickly become unfun, and that's at least 3/4 of what these games are about. So we gotta facilitate that. Now, what exactly does a Nef Garmat do when it's got its victims trapped in the sinking sand? Well, it could unleash a flurry with Draconic Frenzy, a classic dragon feature that I felt compelled to include, simply to make this more of a dragon. The other option, though, is that it could go digging in the dirt with Drain. This is the Nef Garmat's designated desertification ability, draining away the life of the area as it attempts to create a biocrystal. Mechanically, this deals unlimited use area damage at a high DC fortitude save in a sizable emanation. It also takes out plant life in the area, and then it makes a DC 15 flat check. I couldn't quite tell what resulted in the Nef Garmat gaining a crystal in Monster Hunter Explorer, so I simply made it a literal roll of the dice here, though one that becomes easier as the Nef Garmat soaks up more and more bioenergy. I did also design a reaction related to this by the name of Sap Succor. This is mostly me playing around and putting together what I think is a fun concept, rather than something that the Nef Garmat explicitly does. But this triggers on a critical strike with the tail, possibly making that attack a little bit more alluring. It follows that with the Nef Garmat draining the target in this brief point of contact, leaving them drained 1, but also reducing the DC to draw out a biocrystal. This is probably the most important aspect of this ability, as the drain value is increased by further occurrences of it. By this point, I've blabbed about the biocrystal a little bit, so let's take a look at what it actually does. This is an object that has to be wielded, initially by the Nef Garmat that dug it up, but potentially by heroes that managed to disarm it. While wielding it, a creature is quickened, and effectively gains a 6th rank heroism spell, with a +2 to a slew of rolls. This is a significant buff to the Nef Garmat, but as I said, it can be disarmed, and if the heroes manage to steal it from this Earthen Elder Dragon, they can harness that power for themselves, and in doing so earn the ire of a dragon modeled after Anubis himself. Totes worth. Once a Nef Garmat has a biocrystal, it gains access to a few more pieces of its arsenal. The first of these is Detonate Trap, based on the ground-based explosions that our coarse and callous critter can command. I didn't want this to be the Nef Garmat's big ability, and so it deals in between unlimited and limited use area damage to creatures in the center of a sand trap, with a high DC reflex save, just letting us mix it up a bit. This does end the sand trap where this happened, and then puts this ability on a very brief cooldown. However, that big boom that you may be looking for, that you may be expecting, comes in the form of Rising Earth. I kept this as 2 actions, but it can only be used once per biocrystal. it exhausts the deep powers of the biocrystal after being brought to bear. Mechanically, this deals limited use area damage in a vast 60-foot cone, and requires an extreme DC reflex save. Furthermore, failing that save leaves creatures prone, and on a critical failure, they are slowed 1 as they have to dig themselves out of the burying rubble. Of course, this is balanced by the fact that the Nef Garmat needs to have its biocrystal to use it, and can only use it once per biocrystal. So there is some counterplay to it, such as the player stealing the crystal from this dragon. After having all of that designed, I felt like the Nef Garmat wasn't quite draconic enough for my liking. I wanted to make it a bit more straight up dragon to play into its nature as an elder dragon, and one that has that classic shape. To that end, I included the Frightful Presence passive aura in its kit. I went for a fairly large range on this, but stuck with a moderate DC will save since I'm keeping in mind that it is a constant effect. The Nef Garmat doesn't have to do anything for this to happen, so using that lower DC is kind of an obvious choice. That also gives us one of each type of save within the Nef Garmat's kit, and while not always necessary, I do like it when I can put that together. I do actually want to talk about something real quick as we begin to wrap up. The reason I was gone so long is because I was working on a Patreon. So, if you want to support the channel, help me fund more monsters, and see some extra stuff that I make, check it out. It's down in the links below. As for this Supreme Sultan of the Sands, it seeks sublime sparkling stones to sustain a supercharged state that is certain to send shocks and shivers through the staunchest of surveyors. Elder dragons are always interesting and somewhat harrowing creatures to build. I think the main thing that comes to mind when designing an encounter with an elder dragon is that I wouldn't just run them as a creature alone. Tailor their arena to them, and possibly even run them alongside hazards that they innately create, as the living natural disasters that they are. That's going to round out this video though. I'm happy to be back, but be sure to let me know what you think of this creature, and what other sorts of monsters you'd like to see in a comment. If you like what you see here and want more, be sure to leave a like, and then subscribe to the channel. You can also check out the blog, which is linked below along with the Twitter and Discord. Thanks for watching, and have a monstrous Monday.
I don't like sand. It's coarse and rough and irritating, and it gets everywhere.